Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 139 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. Welcome. I'm happy you're here today and excited to share today's topic with you. First, I'll give you a quick update. I am about to leave my house for 4 days to go over to a local hotel downtown. It's like 10 minutes from my house, but I am drafting the book. So my book editor / publisher / coach basically gave me a couple of options, one which is writing every single day, and the other is this more concentrated approach. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the concentrated approach. I've been writing every day for getting in that habit of, like I was sharing with you in the episode about making $1 million in your business. But anyway, really thinking about myself as an author and also giving myself this space for 4 days to go write this 17 chapters. 17 chapters. Everything is ready. Like the outline is approved, the proposal's approved, the title, the book cover, all the things. So I've got everything in place, but I've been really excited about this. And now all of a sudden today, when it's almost here, I have to share, I'm incredibly nervous. I'm super nervous, verging on like fear and anxiety are starting to set in. So I will have to employ all my best self-coaching techniques to make this happen because the manuscript is due on Monday, November 6th, which happens to be my birthday. So anyway, that is what is happening. By the time you listen to it, it will all be done. Or sorry, not done. For sure not done. Drafted. The manuscript will be done. Okay, that is what's happening over here at Melisa Lieberman Coaching. Now let's dive into today's topic, which is what to do when you don't have time for lead generation. And you might not have time for lead generation because you're really busy working on client deliverables and client obligations and just way down in the details of your client work. You might not have time for lead generation because of your personal responsibilities, things that are going on in your personal life or with your family, or maybe you're feeling sick. A lot of us have been going through that, in the Northern Hemisphere with fall setting in. For whatever the reason is, it is a very common occurrence that we hit patches where we don't have time for lead generation. And so today I want to walk you through what to do about that. It is a real thing in your business where you do hit patches where you don't have as much time as you would like. And I want to help you get past that so that you do not have the feast or famine cycle phenomena happening in your business. When you do not work on lead generation, you're going to hit a place in your business where you don't have any work, where you don't have as much work as you would like to have, where you aren't hitting your revenue goals, where you're feeling forced to take on work that you would otherwise not want to take on if you had a thriving pipeline, or being put in the position of agreeing to lower rates or lower fees or lower pricing structures because your pipeline is dry. So we want to avoid all of that by getting into a more effective, more consistent lead generation routine, even when you don't have time. So that is why we're here today. Let's escape that pattern of basically running out of time for lead generation. Before we dive into today's agenda and topic and content, I want to offer you a couple of companion resources that go along with today's episode. The first is a lead generation standard operating procedure. It sounds kind of boring, doesn't it? It's not boring. It's amazing. It is a standard operating procedure that you can put in place in your business in 30 minutes a day, where you will then be able to create that consistent pipeline that you're looking for and overcome some of the time constraints that we're working through on today's episode. So go grab that. It is, again, how to fill your pipeline in 30 minutes a day. You don't have to do it every single day. You could do a couple of these an hour a week, like an hour a week or something. So go check that out. It is at rammethod.com, RAMMETHOD.com. You'll just put in your name and email, and I will send it over to you. So that is a great resource to go along with today's episode. And the other resource that I will recommend to you as part of today's episode is my coaching work. I work with independent consultants like you to help you overcome the obstacles that you're hitting in your business so that you can reach your business goals and reach goals that you never even considered were possible for you. So oftentimes it's easy to hear these techniques and strategies and mindsets that I share with you on this podcast, but it's also really challenging to put it in place for yourself. We're in our own head, and a lot of times it's really, really hard to see through that and get the clarity that you need to overcome whatever obstacle it is that you're hitting. In fact, I have my own coach for this exact reason. I know all of this. This is what I do every day. And I still almost every single day overlook things that I am either missing or misunderstanding or looking at in a non ideal way from a thought process perspective because I'm a human and so are you. So if you would like help getting where you want to go in your business further and more quickly than you would do on your own with more ease, reach out and book a call. Let's talk about whether coaching is a good fit for you. And you can find my calendar at consultmelisa.com. The word consult, MELISA.com. Okay, so with that, let's dive into today's episode. We're going to talk about what to do when you don't have time for lead generation. And so, what I'm going to share with you is a really clear scenario that inspired today's episode. And I want to share that with you for two reasons. Number one, to give context to today's episode. And number two, to help you see you're not alone. So oftentimes we think, oh, I'm the only one who's struggling with this, or why has everyone else figured this out but me? And I want to share this example with you because likely you will see some, if not all of it, in what you're facing and help you to see that you aren't alone. This is a challenge that so many of us have as independent consultants. So we'll start off with that example and then we'll dive into a 3-step process that I want to give to you today to help you get to the place where you can overcome this issue where you feel like you don't have time for lead generation. And then we'll wrap it all up by pulling it together and giving you some very specific next steps to start overcoming this challenge that you've got in your business, whether it's all the time or some of the time. This is going to be a really good episode to help you start making your lead generation process more consistent and stronger, and ultimately more likely to create what you wanted to create, which are leads for your consulting business. All right. So that is the agenda for today. Let's start off with that story that I wanted to tell you, that example from a fellow independent consultant of yours. So this consultant came as I was working with her. Her problem was she said to me, just kind of in passing, actually, we weren't even talking about lead generation at the time, but what she said to me in passing really caught us both off guard. And that was, she said to me, it's been months without lead generation. It's been months since I've done any kind of sort of focus lead generation. She said she's been busy with existing client work and extensions with those clients and just really working on a lot of repeat business, referral business, existing client work. And her quote unquote, it's been months without lead generation. So then, of course, that was a red flag for me. Ding, ding. Let's stop what we were just talking about for a moment and dig into what you just said. This is really important. So she described how she blocks off time for lead generation and said, I block off time for lead generation on my calendar a couple days a week, and it's not happening. Client meetings take precedence. I've got family stuff that pops up, and or I just simply run out of time over and over again to the point where it's been months without lead generation. So I said to her, "Tell me more about how this is impacting your business." And so she described how she had plateaued in her revenue, how she's consistently working sometimes even more to generate the same revenue, and how her bigger goals keep getting put aside. She wants to expand out of this existing client work into more variety of clients, expand into advisory type work versus a lot of hands on kind of work. She has so many business goals. And the impact of her not focusing on lead generation for months is that she's stuck where she's at. She's stuck making the same money with the same clients. And great. On one hand, that's phenomenal that she's got revenue coming in, right? She's got consistency. But on the other hand, she really wants something different and more in her business. And she's not getting that because she is deferring and delaying and ignoring lead generation. And so I asked her, what do you think the solution is to this challenge? What do you think the solution is to you not being able, you keep running out of time for lead generation? And she said, okay, I think the answer is I need to block off Monday afternoons. Mornings are probably not great because people are just getting back to work, after the weekend. I'll block off Monday afternoons for lead generation and I'm just going to stick with it. And I said, that's great. That can definitely be part of the solution here, but it's not going to get you really any different results than you've already been getting. And so she was a little bit surprised by my reaction because it seemed like a logical plan, right? I said, let's just take a step back and look at the root cause of this problem. The root cause of the problem is not that you don't have time. The root cause of the problem is not that your client continues to interrupt you or disrupt you or schedule meetings over your time blocks for lead generation. Your root cause of your problem is not that you don't have enough hours in the day or the family things coming up. I didn't say all of this to her, but just summarizing it to you, the way that we approached it is really digging into what was the root cause. The root cause, as I investigated this with her and we explored it, wasn't all of those external things that I just listed. The root cause, as she and I uncovered this together, is that she was doing a couple things that were ultimately the root cause. The first was in her mind, she was overcomplicating what is required for successful lead generation. She was imagining she had to have this 1 hour or 90-minute or even 2 hour block of time in order to be successful at lead generation. Somehow she needed, everything to be quiet and calm and not disrupted for 90 minutes or 2 hours was what she had in her mind. On the flip side of that, she wasn't valuing just even 15 minutes in her day. She was writing that off. Oh, I only have 10 minutes right now in between this or that, or I only have 15 minutes right now before my next meeting. And she also wasn't valuing her business, that lead generation was a priority. She was thinking, if it fits in, I'll do it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to wait until next week. And then that happened over and over and over again. So you can see that the root cause of this situation that she was facing, which is I haven't done any lead gen for months, the root cause was not her hectic schedule or her client demands or family demands. The root cause was the way she was thinking about her time and the way she was thinking about her lead generation and the priority of it relative to other things. And so then, based on this root cause, and me pointing out to her the difference here between the external and the internal reasons for her not doing any lead gen for months, based on that root cause, we put the solution in place. What we did was we figured out, okay, let's just put the logistics in place that make this easier. So instead of blocking off 2 hours, let's block off different 30-minute intervals across the week to make this happen. There is some strategy involved here and tactics involved in trying to make this a more streamlined process that you adhere to. But then what we also did was we worked on how to make this a priority in her mind, just like as if it was a doctor's appointment. She's not going to blow off a doctor's appointment. So how do we create the same level of commitment to lead gen as she would have to a doctor's appointment, for example. And we worked on the mentality around that. We also worked on her mindset around 15 minutes matters. 10 minutes can matter. When you set yourself up to know how you're going to use that 10 minutes or that 15-minute block, it can matter and it can make a difference. And lead generation doesn't have to be complicated or require this sort of office hours where nothing is interrupting you. Even 10 or 15 minutes can matter. And also, we worked on the mindset with her that 50% is better than 0%. A lot of times we think in our minds, especially as consultants who have such a high bar for ourselves, that if we can't do something the quote unquote right way, then we shouldn't do it at all. Can you just hear your mom say, or your parents saying that to you right now? I can from, it's like ingrained in us. 50% is better than 0%. What if you even just spent 5 minutes on lead gen? Reach out to someone to schedule an appointment. Then you get the appointment on the calendar and you're going to it. You're going to follow through with that. So really figuring out the root cause of why you are not following through with your lead generation in order to make most use of the time you do have. That is the bottom line. So you might be saying things like, this is my favorite part of the episodes, but Melisa, I really don't have enough time to do lead gen, or the little time I do have for lead gen won't be enough, or someone's always interrupting my lead gen time, or I'm having a hard time fitting it in because of these other responsibilities, or I just can't seem to catch up. As soon as I catch up, then I'll put this in place. These are excuses, my friend. These are excuses. You are a business owner, and it is the core number one fundamental of being a business owner is that you sell business. If you don't sell business, you don't have a business. And so I want to push back on you for all those things that seem like logical reasons. They are not reasons. They are certainly obstacles. They are certainly challenges, and certainly sometimes is a little bit more challenging than others. Absolutely. I have a client who described it to me as this. I love this phrase. I hope I don't butcher it. But essentially, he said, you know what? That reason I just gave you is essentially a cowardly excuse masquerading as a business justification. I thought it was such a great way to say it. It's the same thing as but Melisa. It's a cowardly excuse masquerading as a business justification. Now, I'm not calling you a coward, of course. You've started a consulting business. The last thing you are is a coward. But we are all operating and avoiding some fear of some sort. And so you've got to know what it is that you are facing that is creating this dynamic where you're prioritizing other things over the very lifeblood of your business, selling new business. All right. So I really want to point this out to you that there is no now, of course, if you come down with COVID or you have a death in the family or you're going on vacation, of course, there are times where you're not going to focus on business development for a week or two. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about right now is your inability to create a consistent lead generation routine because you think you don't have time. And that's the problem that we need to solve for. Because again, if you don't focus on business development and lead generation, you don't have a business. All right. So I'm on a bit of a rant today, all in the interest of helping you. I can assure you. Okay. So now we know what the scenario is, and you hopefully can see in that client's scenario, in the other independent consultant scenario, who happens to be my client, you can see what the challenges are, that you aren't the only one facing these types of challenges, that this is a common problem that all of us face at different times, some more than others, some all the time in our businesses. And so that's why we're talking about this today. And that's why I want to point out to you that this is not the external problem that it seems, that it's not a math problem. The problem is not your calendar or the number of hours in a week. or the number of hours in a day. The problem is the way you're prioritizing, the way you're thinking about your time, and quite frankly, most likely the way you're thinking about the likelihood of success of your activities. Those are the root types of root causes. And that's fabulous news because that's all on you and therefore all your ability to shift things. If we're blaming external things like the clients, it's really hard to change that. But when you take responsibility and say, you know what, this is actually all on me, and that gives you all the power to change it. So that's why I want to walk you through these 3 steps for you to put in place in order to address the issue when you think you don't have enough time for business development. Number 1, you want to create that intentional plan. I was just talking to a client a minute ago, another independent consultant, and he told me, I have a block for my lead gen, but I don't have a plan for the lead gen. It was a great example he gave me that it felt really clean in his mind. It might help you too. He said, when I go to the gym, I know what class I'm going to. I know it's going to be weightlifting or I know it's going to be cardio. I know what I've signed up for. I know why I'm going there. I know why I'm doing it, what I'm doing. It's a block in my calendar and I know what it is. And he said, I'm not doing that with respect to lead gen. I just have the blocks of time. So, of course, when you get to that block of time, if you don't have a specific thing already planned, the likelihood of you negotiating yourself out of it is very high. And so, the first thing you want to do to overcome this situation where it feels like you don't have enough time for business development is to create this intentional plan. So, set some time aside. I would recommend starting with 20 minutes a day. 15 minutes a day, whatever feels like, okay, I could do this. I could work on 15 minutes a day. Now, if you don't have any clients, I would recommend a different approach, but let's talk about the scenario where you're just juggling a lot of things. If you don't have any clients, then you need to truly be working on this as if it's your full-time job. But in the scenario where you have clients, you've got different responsibilities, let's start with 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day. Block it off. Put it in a specific spot on your calendar each day. It might need to be at 8 a.m. because otherwise, the likelihood of being interrupted increases throughout the day. So let's start the day off with it. Then your brain might tell you, well, no one's going to reply to me because they're not looking at their email at 8 a.m. or however it is you're generating leads. Don't worry about that. Just get into a habit here. So we want to set that time aside, but we don't want to stop there. So many people stop there. Okay, I'm just going to block it off. Like I was describing to that other independent consultant who said, look, when I block off the time, then I don't make a plan. I end up just blowing it off. So we don't want to stop there. We want to finish this step 1, which is the intentional plan. You know exactly when every week, could vary every week, or it could be the same time every week. When are you going to work on lead gen? What is that exact time from 2 to 2:20 or whatever it is? And then make sure you know exactly how you're going to use that time. Instead of writing down lead generation in the meeting invitation to yourself, you put things like, I am going to contact these 3 people for this specific outcome. I am going to book a meeting with these 3 people in that 20-minute block that I put there. So that's step number 1. Now let's talk about addressing those root causes like I shared with you earlier. That kind of greases the skids, putting the time in place and being really clear about what you expect to accomplish in that time. And then the next 2 steps I'm going to give you are the key to making it successful and getting further than you probably have gotten on already on your own. And that is the second step, anticipating blockers and building strategies to overcome those blockers. Do not hope or expect that you're not going to be interrupted. Do not hope or expect that something more pressing is going to come along. Do not hope or expect and build your process around the idea that you're not going to try to talk yourself out of it. Of course, all of those things are going to happen. Most of the time, we build a plan thinking that those things aren't going to happen most of the time. Of course, they're going to happen. Listen, you're a consultant. You deal with risk identification and mitigation all the time as part of the work you do. Treat this the same way. Think about, what is your plan in advance? What is my, write it down. What is my plan when I get interrupted during this block? During these 20 minutes, someone's going to text me, Slack me, Teams me, whatever the thing is. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle it? And answer that in a very clear way. You might decide I'm going to turn off every single device I have for 20 minutes. And even if it's a dire emergency, I probably won't know for 20 minutes. Whatever your particular answer to that is, write it down. Don't just even think of it in your head, write it down. This is your plan. This is going to happen. How are you going to handle it? Because if you decide in advance, you're deciding with your prefrontal cortex, your logical thinking, and you're setting yourself up so that your lizard brain, as they call it, isn't going to try to deter you. That's its job. Don't let it happen. The second plan you want to make for yourself in advance as part of your lead generation process is answering the question, how are you going to handle it when you try to talk yourself out of doing the lead generation? Don't assume you're not going to talk yourself out of it. Of course, you're going to try to talk yourself out of it. Of course, you're going to make a really good logical business justification for it to try to talk yourself out of it. You're a smart person. Your brain is really smart. It knows exactly what buttons to push to talk you out of something. It's like the client said, this is a cowardly excuse masquerading as a business justification or a logical argument. Of course, you're going to try to talk yourself out of it. Just stop thinking, oh, I'll be better and not talk myself out of it, or I'll just push through. No, admit to yourself, I'm going to try to talk myself out of this every single time. And make yourself a plan of what you're going to say back to yourself in order to overcome that. A couple of ideas are, one way to do that is to say, you know what? It's not about the thing I'm doing. It's about the habit that I'm building. I promised myself I was going to do this thing. Happens to be lead generation. That's what I'm going to do. So you make it more about fulfilling the thing versus trying to debate whether it's worth it or not. The other thing you can leverage, I was sharing this with the client who was telling me the gym example. You can say, can I just open the plan that I had? He was saying to me, sometimes when he doesn't want to go to the gym, he will say to himself, can I just I'll just go in and walk a mile. What is your can I just corollary to lead generation? Can I just open the plan that I had? Can I just send an email? Can I just, once you get started, most likely, then you start creating some momentum for yourself. And the third blocker that's very common that you want to build a strategy in advance for is something around the lines of, this time won't be well spent. Back to that other example where the independent consultant said, I need 90 minutes. You're never going to get 90 minutes, my friend. Or if you do, it's going to be very few and far between. So ask yourself, set yourself up for these smaller, shorter blocks, right? Use the intentional plan to overcome part of that. And then know that your brain's going to argue with you. Well, you just don't have enough time. You'll have to do it later. Of course, that's going to happen. Anticipate that's going to happen every single time where your brain says, look, you don't have enough time. Let's do it later. Instead, put a process in place for yourself. This is going to happen. Write down what you're going to do about that. For example, you might say to yourself, what can I do in the next 5 minutes? I blocked 20 minutes off for this, and now I'm only down to 5. What can I do in the next 5 minutes instead of blowing it off? And then coming to me and saying, I haven't done lead generation in a couple of months. Or ask yourself, how is it possible that all I need is 5 minutes? How is it possible that all I need is 5 minutes for lead generation? How amazing would that be if your lead generation process took you 5 minutes a day? You've got to ask yourself these types of questions and figure out how to make that happen. Okay, so that was step 2. Anticipate the blockers and build strategies to overcome them. And then the third step of this process is to evaluate and iterate. This is not a pass or fail process. You are not either getting 100% or 0%. Your perfectionism, if you've got that, which likely you do in some form or fashion, is not your friend here. This is not what we're doing. Lead generation is a constant process of testing. It's a constant process of testing to see what works, what you can adjust, both by way of the way you're generating leads, the way that you're finding new potential consulting clients, and also the way that you are holding to the time that you set aside to do that. And so you want to just be putting in a process where you are intentionally creating awareness. Where are you negotiating with yourself out? Where are you justifying something that looks like a good business reason and really it's just a fancy way that you've talked yourself out of it and made an excuse for yourself? You want to evaluate and iterate and optimize your mindset and continuously adjust until all of this becomes a habit that becomes really formulaic, where you know, if I do these things, this is how my pipeline looks. So the questions you might ask yourself when you're implementing that third step to evaluate and iterate and constantly play around with, how do I get to the place where I am making time consistently for lead generation, and as a result, I'm generating leads? The questions you might ask yourself: so this week I didn't complete as much lead generation as I had planned. Why? What excuses could I have been making at the time? How could I have avoided that thing that disrupted me? Ask yourself, get really curious about what it is that is disrupting you. And usually it is some self-negotiation that's occurred. What are the ideas you have for yourself to overcome that in the future? So that, again, you're not setting yourself up for, I either do this perfectly or not at all. All right. So let's wrap this episode up today by pulling all of this together to say to you, what do you do when you don't have time for business development? The answer is you must make time for business development. You cannot say to yourself, I haven't done business development in months, and expect to have a business. This doesn't mean that you need hours upon hours a week to focus on business development if you've got some form of a pipeline or client load in place. If you don't have a pipeline, then it does mean that you need to spend hours upon hours in the week to get your pipeline going. But in either case, you must generate leads in order to have a business. So telling me you don't have time for business development is almost as if you're saying, I don't have time for a business. And you got to look in the mirror and be really honest with yourself. Once you get past that, you want to make an intentional plan. Start with 10 or 15 or 20 minutes a day. And plan ahead for those roadblocks and obstacles. Nothing has gone wrong. Expect they are going to happen. The justifying, the self-negotiation, the roadblocks, the obstacles, all of it's going to happen. You don't plan for the best, you plan for the worst. And then you want to put a process in place to evaluate and iterate until this becomes both a habit and an effective habit. You want to get to the place where you're consistent with lead generation and you know exactly what that formula is of how much lead generation you do equals this amount of a pipeline. All right. So that is what I have for you today. Don't forget those two companion resources. The lead generation in 30-day method is called the rammethod.com, RAMMETHOD. And if you want help with this, really getting yourself to the place where you can more clearly see the excuses you're making and overcome those, book a call with me and see if coaching is a good fit. You can find my calendar at consultmelisa, MELISA.com. I look forward to seeing you there, and I will see you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.